Welcome to Unleash Your Audacious Confidence on Win-Win Women TV. This show is all about sharing the tips, tools, and techniques that will allow you to step boldly in the direction of your dreams despite your feelings, fears, or past failures, to imagine what's possible for yourself and live the life you deserve. Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of Unleash Your Audacious Confidence here on Win-Win Women TV. I'm your host, Alicia Curry. I am so thrilled that you joined me today because on the show today, we are going to talk about some really, really important things that do affect your confidence. So stick around. In fact, go grab a friend. Share this out with her. And let's have this conversation about wage equality today. But before we do, I want to encourage you to go to winwinwomen.tv. We have so many amazing shows there for you, whether it's health and wellness, finances, relationships, whatever it is, personal development and growth. You know, you can find it on winwinwomen.tv. And if you go to winwinwomen.com, you can also see where an event is happening in your area for Win-Win Women. We have events happening all over the country, in the United States, and all over the world. So go check that out, winwinwomen.com, two separate sites. But if you want to know more about the shows that we host and what we do, you can check us out on redcarpetceo.com. If you'd like to be a show host yourself, go to redcarpetceo.com, click the link, and you can sign up to start your own show. You can also be a guest on our show. Just click the link and you can become a guest here on the Unleash Your Audacious Confidence show on Win-Win Women TV. So without any more delay, I want us to start this conversation. I'm going to bring my guest up. Her name is Bobev. She is the founder of Disrupt the Gap. And she's here to talk to us about wage equality. So welcome to the show, Shell.
Hi, Alicia. Hi, everyone tuning in today.
Hey, I am so thrilled to have this conversation because we did a pre-show a few minutes ago, and you talked about so many myths that are out there that people are believing about wage equality. And we said we were going to talk about it. We were going to give you some of those myths. So I'm going to start the show off by just sharing what are those myths that are out there about wage equality.
Yeah, let's dive in just a few of them. So a lot of the stats that are circulated, widely circulated, or the talking points, they are not exactly, they're not always what you think they mean. So for example, we often see this stat that women make 80 cents for every dollar that men make. And the average person hearing that thinks that that's a comparison of two peers doing the same job. And it's not. That stat is looking at total annual earnings across any jobs.
Wow.
So, you know, I'll give you an example. A very common job for men in America, or one of the more common jobs for men in America, is truck driver. That could be a well-paying job, skewing it in men's favor. For women, a more common job, well-paying job for women could be nursing. So we can't look at total annual earnings and think that that's two peers in the same job. Certainly, we have every right to want women to be financially secure and independent, and we should look at women's total annual earnings, but it's not apples to apples. I will share that there are studies that do look at apples to apples and does expose some issues. So I'll share with everyone just one example. So there was a big study done about jobs and technology, and it got down to offers for the same job at the same company, and found that women were being offered, again, for these tech jobs, anywhere from 4% less to 45% less for the same job at the same company.
Whoa.
Now, that's a gap, right?
That's a huge gap. Oh my gosh.
In the New York City area, the average was about 10%. So, you know, I would say number one myth that we have to dispel is those common stats. We see 80 cents for every dollar. We need to look at the apples to apples information.
Because it's much worse than that. It could be much worse.
It could be, or it could be less, you know?
It could be less, yeah. On that stat, because then they talk about women of color even being paid less, and And, you know, as the minorities go down, it goes even further down. So is that also to be questioned?
Yes, in the same way, because that's also looking at total annual earnings. I will say that intersectionality absolutely plays a role, and it could amplify gaps. So let's connect this to another myth that we have to dispel, that the pay gap is a women's issue. This also affects men of color. So that intersectionality does absolutely get amplified. Um, another myth we can talk about, or another talking point that can go awry, is every time we tell people the sentiment of know your worth, know your value. There's two things that I find wrong with that school of thought. First, it places the onus of fixing the issue on the individual. Well, you just need to know your worth and go in there, right? Asking them to fix something they didn't create. And the second issue that I take with that is this language of worth and value, because it's being applied to a profession, something which we intertwine with our identity. It's very easy for people to now conflate their personal worth with their paycheck. And that's going to just spiral from there. So,
and that's where we talk about confidence issues.
Yeah.
When you conflate what you make with profession and your value and your worth.
Absolutely. That can be very impactful and destructive. So I will share with the viewers here a little bit about my own journey and how I ultimately realized that my sense of worth and confidence was impacted, and ultimately I was able to rebuild that. So just a little bit about me, what led me to found Disrupt the Gap. Like a lot of folks, a lot of women, I suspected that there was a variance in pay between myself and my peer. And I did all the things that we tell people to do, right? Go in there, demonstrate the impact, get extra credentials, right? So for many years, I really thought that I could address this on my own. And after years of doing that, it was clear that that was not going to happen. And I had to find the courage to go through a legal process, which also took several years.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a very deep and transformative journey. I will say it didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
So let me ask you, I don't mean to cut you off, but before you get too far down, I wanted to ask you, what gave you the courage to actually seek legal counsel?
One of the many things I thought about was this idea of being accountable to a future version of me. Sometimes when Disrupt the Gap gives workshops, we talk about externalizing your why. You know, each of us, when we have to summon the courage to do something for our own behalf, we might falter versus the courage we might feel and the fortitude if we're fighting for someone else, right?
Yeah.
And I realized in my own mind that mechanism was entirely possible, because I imagined me plus 30, 40 years. And I realized I had to be accountable to her so that she was not suffering later in life. Women are twice as likely to be poor in the latter years of their life, twice as likely.
Wow. That just blew my mind, Shell. That really blew my mind. Wow. I just want to take a pause on that, because it's true. When you're accountable to someone else, you do it. And then when you're if you look at your future self and you say, you know what, and you look back and you say, I had that opportunity then and I didn't stand up for myself, and look at me now, and you live with so much regret. Wow. That was a lot. That was very courageous. I love that. All right, go ahead. I'm glad I interrupted you for that question, because that just blew my mind.
Yeah. So, you know, that was one of the mechanisms I looked at. And, you know, I often reflected on like integrity, and I'll share with our viewers here what integrity means to me. Integrity to me means you will do the right thing even when it costs you something. What could it cost you? Time, money, political favor, or the unknown. And I had to be willing to embark on a journey that would impact me in many ways I couldn't have predicted, in ways that I'm glad I didn't know about, right?
Yeah.
But I had to use that integrity as a North Star. And I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it sound like that type of journey is easy. It's not for everyone, but I do believe that due to a whole celestial team above, that journey was made possible.
Yes, because it was a long fight, and it was um from what you said, it stripped a lot from you
Yes,
personally.
absolutely.
And how did you realize the toll that it took on your own confidence and your own self-worth
Yeah.
having to do
So
that fight? Mhm.
if you would have asked me, back in my corporate days, if you would have asked me if my worth or my confidence was being impacted by the pay gap that was unfolding, I wouldn't have known it. I would have thought, of course I know my value, this and that, but I'll share when I realized that something was wrong. So after exiting the corporate environment, I was started to take workshops for female entrepreneurs, and I was in this group workshop, and every woman in the class had a different business. And there came a day where one woman in the room wanted to get feedback from the group about pricing. She was a personal chef, so she talked about what her pricing was. And everyone in that room was piping up saying, girl, raise your prices. The instructor of that group, kind of a brash woman from New York City that was very direct, she said to her, this other girl, you need to go take a look in the mirror and figure it out what's going on inside of you that is preventing you from charging what you should be charging. And even though that instructor uttered those words to someone else, those words went through me like a lightning bolt.
Mhm.
During my entrepreneurial journey, I focused on, well, what should I charge, this and that, and I realized that my fixation on that was because of some inner workings that were going on from all those years prior. That was my
Yeah.
lightning bolt moment.
Wow. How did you recognize that there was that gap in pay for yourself?
So I suspected something early on. I had made an internal move from one role to another role, and I believe that role should have came with a raise, and I was told no, no. So my inner voice told me early on that something that probably wasn't true, and I set the course early on to say, well, let's revisit this in a year. And I would revisit it and I would quantify my impact. One day there was a piece of paper that was left out that had a printout, and it wasn't my salary; it was a male coworker's salary. And that's how I saw that what I was told was my maximum salary was literally one half of the number on that paper.
Wow. And that was apples to apples.
Exactly, we were peers. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, right. And it was I kept my composure for a long time, and I still continued on the course thinking that I could fix this. I could just continue to quantify my impact. I could do, more work, more complex projects, more certifications, more degrees, right? And a carrot was being dangled too. I was told, well, the company's not doing well, so that's the reason why things can't happen. But I persisted. Looking back on it now, I would tell that younger version of me that it wasn't going to happen, right? Not to believe the carrot, but when you're going through it, it's easy to
You want
have.
to have hope. You want to believe people have
Yeah.
integrity in what they're saying, and um that kind of transition, that's a great place to transition, because we wanted to talk about what women can do when they recognize something like that.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely. So let me dive into that. So,
yeah.
when I counsel folks, there's certainly advice that I would give on like the general sense of how to advocate for your salary, but let us talk very specifically about when you discover a gap, right? Because that's a very specific situation. So let me give you a bunch of thoughts on that. First, very practical matters. Document everything. Escalate it within the organization, whether it's within human resources or your own leadership. I would also say it's very important to understand your legal rights and what the parameters are. There are certain lengths of time that you need to come forward within in order to have a valid claim. Also understanding the look back period of when your claim could look at. So for example, New Jersey, as of 2018, there is now a 6-year look back period that you could be compensated for if applicable. So definitely know your rights and talk to a lawyer. One of the things I didn't necessarily have the fortitude to do at the time, but I would counsel someone to do it now, is when you speak to your leaders and to those decision makers that can help you, go beyond just making this about, compensating you for your value, and speak to equality. More and more, this is becoming something that people are aware of and understand the gravity of it. And I do believe it's okay to speak directly with that verbiage to make it clear, just how serious this is. I would also say one must keep their composure all throughout. When something is unjust, cruel, it's very tempting to want to speak your mind, right? Something that women in particular need to be mindful of is that when women show emotion in the workplace, it could be weaponized against them. So when they go low, you go high.
Yeah.
We talked about a moment ago externalizing your why. So if it's tricky for you to trudge ahead on behalf of yourself, think about being accountable to future you, accountable to the things that you want to do for your children.
Yeah, because that when you're not paid fairly, when we look at like single moms, if they're not paid fairly for doing the job, they're spending time away from their children. A lot of times they're working overtime to show up. They're working extra, they're doing the things, they're not getting paid equal, but they still have the same living expenses. They have school expenses, they have food, their cost of living is high. And so why aren't they being compensated equally? So it does affect more than just the woman. So when you're talking about look externally, it's not just, well, I'm not getting my fair share. It's what is that impact on your lifestyle and the people around you that it's impacting in a negative way as well.
Yes. And, these days you might hear this, people talk about generational wealth. This can be a major, major determinant in that. Last couple things I'll give for people that are discovering a gap and navigating that. I would say be careful in how you frame the blame, and not to take it out on the person who's making more than you. They might not even know. Even if they do know, they might have their own beliefs about, how they feel about that. So just, keep in mind that they're not necessarily the bad guy. And
You're
the
not
last
the person in charge of that.
Exactly. And the last thing I want to give here is you will be protected for this decision. When you have the fortitude, when you have the courage to step forward, and you know that you've got a whole celestial army above you, you will be protected for this decision. It could be dark, could challenge you in ways you can't imagine, but know that you will be protected.
So let me ask you this then, because I've heard that men typically will go in and ask for more anyway, and women just take what they're offered.
Yes. Yeah. Great comments. Let's dive into that. There is research that shows that a contributor to a pay gap is women having less starting salary, sometimes because they're asking for less. But let's dig into that, because I don't want to point the blame. What I'm about to say, like these cliches phrases that I'm about to say, I want our viewers to imagine this being written out in a beautiful script hanging on someone's wall. Stay humble. Be grateful. What are these messages that we are socialized with that tell us to accept what's given, be nice about it, not rock the boat about it? So unfortunately, women can be conditioned to, be accommodating, right?
And be guilty and feel shame and guilt for asking for more.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's part of this conversation as well.
Yeah. And then there are some laws coming out. I believe you mentioned that some time ago. You were sharing about this, about transparency in wages. What are some of those things that are coming out?
So over the last few years and across the next few years, there's lots of things that are emerging. I'll give you an example of what New Jersey's law looks like, and then kind of some things happening around the country. So New Jersey has what's considered the toughest equal pay law in the nation as of 2018. I'm on a mission to evangelize this law. Whenever I meet people, they don't know about the law, so let this be my testimony today. It increased the look back period to 6 years. It also dramatically increased the penalties that are on employers. Which employer could be liable for 3 times whatever that gap was, again, up to 6 years. So that's a very dramatic amplification. Other things that people may have heard of, California has required as of this year employers to report in on pay. I've looked at the reporting requirements myself. It basically asks employers in California that have 100 or more employees to categorize them into pay bands and then report on the pay bands by demographical bucket. So it might say, women of color, this. I would describe what California is doing with that as a step in the right direction. It won't necessarily uncover peer-to-peer gaps. But let's talk about transparency. Transparency is the idea that the salary will be listed on the job posting. New York City is already doing this. It's being talked about in New Jersey. And one thing I want to add here is that often when we think about change happening, we expect change to happen at the federal level, at the state level. There are places that are affecting change at the local level. So not too far from me, in the city of Jersey City, New Jersey, they have an ordinance in the city that says if you have employees in this city, you must put the pay on the job posting. I think it's incredible. And when we look at change that can happen at the local level, it just opens up a whole world of possibility for other possible changes. So just to kind of summarize it, you have rights at the federal level, the state level, perhaps the local level. Do familiarize yourself. And one thing I'll add here is you may have more rights than you realize, because sometimes it's not just a matter of where you're based, or you might also be protected by a law that's in effect in the location of where the employer is based. So I would look at the protections on where the employer is based and where you work from, because you might be covered in one or both of those scenarios.
Wow. My goodness. There's so much to this, so much stuff, and you are an expert in this. You've been really digging into it, and I can't wait for us to have our discussion afterwards. But if you are, let's say you're in an organization and you've noticed this happening, maybe it's not happening to you, but you notice a coworker, or you've recognized it. Just for anyone else listening to this, if you recognize it, what can you do within your organization, either to raise the red flag, or what should you do to alert people about this?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question. And it's very nuanced based on, let's say, the culture in that organization. Anyone out there that wants to be an advocate for a peer, I think that's very commendable, and you should. Some of the things I've heard people are doing are creating these anonymous Excel spreadsheets where they input their salary and then they can see, they can compare. I would say let the person who is impacted be the driver of that process. If they're speaking up, you may also join them in going to people in a position of authority in human resources, or whatever to be the leadership. But let's take this away from you noticing a specific peer, and talk about if you're just a change maker and you want to see this brought forward in your organization. Couple of things I'll throw out there. I would say become versed in the business case for wage equality. There's many stats that prove that having gender parity can be a driver of revenue, of reduction in expenses, including turnover. And turnover is now the number one response. Leaving a company is the number one response that both men and women will now take if they discover a pay gap. And that response is more common than them going to HR or their manager. They're more willing to leave.
They're just going to leave.
Yeah. So I would say familiarize yourself with the business case. Certainly Disrupt a Gap has materials to help you do that. Also benchmarking that organization with others in the industry. Again, Disrupt the Gap has materials that can help you do that, where you can see with an assessment how progressive are we or not, so that you know the specific talking points to surface. I would also build an internal network and a coalition among people that care about this and are willing to advocate for it. I would look for inroads as well. Let's say the company already has some work that they're doing with DEI. Great. Can you find an inroad with the the equity part, right?
Yeah.
I might ask for that. So, and
I think that part sometimes gets lost. The equity.
exactly. Yeah.
A lot of diversity, but the equity needs
Mhm.
to also be on par.
Exactly. And, aside from all the things that an internal change agent could do, yeah, there's certain times where the position of leadership or the culture is not where it needs to be, and I want to let those change makers know that you can do so much, but do not take it personally if your efforts are not moving the needle. That change will happen when the organization, when the leadership is ready for it, and hopefully it happens from internal and not from an external matter that forced their hand.
Yes, 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 yes. Is there anything that you wanted to share that I did not ask you about that you think is also important in this topic?
Well, given that your show is about confidence, I'll speak briefly about what the process could look like to rebuild your confidence, your esteem after discovering a pay gap or really any degrading experience. And what I want to offer is that process to rebuild, let's say, worth esteem, start to think of it as a dimmer switch. Often in life, we look for these fixes that are going to just flip a switch and we're all just going to be better, right? And the truth is it's a dimmer switch, which means we could go backwards a little and forwards. I would also start to familiarize yourself with your superpowers, your unique purpose. That's a whole journey, for a person to understand, why am I on earth? What do I need to accomplish? That's a whole journey. Have trusted people hold up the mirror for you. That could help. I think part of the healing process, and for me as well, is to take fresh eyes to the people that are not treating you right, because it can be very easy and fair for you to think negatively towards those folks. But when you start to realize that hurt people, it takes the edge off of that experience being a personal one. And last tip I'll give here is start to create some own documentation in your life, some reminders of the things that make you feel proud and capable. I create a folder on my computer. The name of the folder is When You Need to See It. And when you need to see it, I've got screenshots of those moments where positive feedback came in my life. I kicked butt with something. And when I need to see it, I've got that collection there. So that's a very quick, very high level process. Again, allow it to unfold over time.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. That was so great. I appreciate that. How can people get a hold of you if they want to know more, if they want to check you out or get your...
Yeah, thank you. So at the very least, click with me on LinkedIn. You've got the spelling of my name there, Bobev. I'm probably the only Shell Bobev in the world, so you'll be able to find me. You can also visit the website, wedisruptthegap.com. Wedisruptthegap.com. Please know, no matter your situation, if you're somebody that's advocating for yourself, you're an internal change maker and you want support bringing this to your organization, please know that myself and Disrupt the Gap is in your corner.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to join us today and share all this gold that you just shared with us. This has been so amazing. And for everyone watching, those of you who are here live, don't go anywhere. But for those of you watching, I want to encourage you to be bold, to be brave, and every day do one thing to step out with audacious confidence and own your awesome. I am Alicia Curry, and I will see you next time on another episode of Unleash Your Audacious Confidence here on Win Win Women TV. Thank you, everyone.